I did it. I did what I did there, internet. We're never even going to tell you. They know what I did.
I will never speak out loud about what you did.
Carrying it to my grave.
There you go. That's a storytelling game of personal horror. Thank you for tuning in. We've
And,
been your.
and the
We've been
panel's
your.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Mazel
way I
tov.
see it, you don't get on a panel with B. Dave Walters and then immediately betray him.
I feel like that's exactly what you do. You start a panel with B. Dave Walters by immediately betraying him.
I mean, let's be honest, it would be on brand, but yes, that's yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to hijack everything. That's
Hey, Meredith, I love you too. All right. All right, so we'll do some real quick introductions and we'll move on from there. My name is James Davey. I am a longtime LARPer and longtime tabletop role player. Recently, I was the president of one of the largest World of Darkness fan clubs for about 3 years. I was the president of Underground Theater. I was a sub coordinator in One World by Night, which is another large LARP organization. I never really played on the MES side of things, but about 3 years ago, I decided for my own mental health to step away from large scale LARP organizations, and I founded my own RPG company. And I founded with my brother here, who's also in this panel. I founded Gem and I RPG. We call ourselves Gem and I. It's GEM and EYE. We call ourselves that because my name is James and his name is James, and you could realistically refer to either of us as Gem, and sometimes we say Gem and I. So it's real dumb, but that's our company name. And we recently kickstarted our first tabletop RPG product, The Midnight World, which is a horror tabletop RPG that specifically focuses on anxiety, PTSD, and depression, and how those things affect you in a world full of monsters. So that said, Jim, you want to give a moment to introduce yourself here?
Sure. My name is Jim Beverly. I've known James a long time, and we met in the army. We became best friends, and I mean we're brothers. That's really the only way to put it. But we had this our relationship formed because of tabletop role playing games. We met at a promotion board of all places, and then we found out that we both played WoW. We started playing WoW together. Then we both found out we played Vampire, and we started playing Vampire together. And it started just this relationship of shared gaming experiences and storytelling. We were both combat veterans at the time that we met, and we both deployed once again each after we had met. So we just had all these things in common. We had similar similar issues with PTSD as far as our military service and our deployments go. And we kind of just sat down a couple of years ago and said, after he ran a hunter game, we wanted to kind of recapture that magic that he had with that hunter game. And we said, how do we express anxiety and things like that, and how are we able to explain what that's like to people who may not understand it in in a setting, in an environment that's safe and consensual and productive. And we just got down into the weeds, and we were trying to figure out how to write it in an existing game, and we realized we need to make our own game for this. So the last year and a half, 2 years has been kind of a whirlwind, because we went from two guys who have been playing games our whole relationship. We have no idea what we're doing, and we made a thing that we think is really something special. I think we have gotten a lot of good feedback. We've gotten a lot of really constructive feedback. It's coming together, and I guess what excites me is just the potential. Bringing it back to what we're here on the panel for, is the potential for this thing to help people. And I think if I think he and I will both say neither of us did this to get rich. We don't necessarily care about becoming WotC or Onyx Path level, that kind of stuff. But I mean, sure, that'd be great. That'd be super cool. But if we put this out, we release this book that A, that accomplishes one of our dreams, and B, if it helps one person, it'll all have been worth it.
Yeah, I'll make sure to mention to Rich Thomas next time I see him that you compared him to Watsy. I'm sure it'll make his day. So is it B Dave, B Dave Walters? Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Ave. Well, a couple things. First, is the resident Ventru. I'm expressly in it for the money. But before we go, all jokes aside, I want to acknowledge you guys for being just right out of the gates, being willing to offer something as open and vulnerable as like referring to each other as brothers, admitting the fact that you deal with things like anxiety, PTSD, that you've been through things, and that's a struggle. A lot of times, I think people think that to be tough or to be a man, in however that's currently defined, means bottling things up and not admitting when you are in pain or not admitting when you need help. And I think the fact that you all do that is a huge thing. I think even just saying that out loud when someone else hears it, you give permission to somebody else to admit it, and that's a huge thing. So I hope you guys understand that. I appreciate you sharing that.
Thanks a bunch, man.
I myself, I just I say words on camera wherever anyone will let me. I also have been playing RPGs since I was 13, so closing in on 30 years now. I've been playing Vampire World of Darkness type things, since the mid 90s. Like that all very much landed on me as a teenager. I run my own Discord and my Patreon games. I run about 10 World of Darkness sessions a week. I run about 6 World of Darkness sessions a week. There's a goodly amount of D&D sprinkled in there and some Battle Lords. But
so I feel like we can say that after this, you're going to run some Midnight World sessions too.
I mean, if we can get it on the calendar, yeah, man, sure, absolutely. Why
let's
not?
Talk.
Well, it's funny because Jason, Carl, and I were talking about this. I probably have run more sessions of V5 than anyone else on Earth. I run like 200.
Wow.
I would say I'm close to running as many vampire games, period. But I'm sure there's plenty of like home groups that have like been going nonstop since like '93. So, but for V5, definitely.
Real quick, everybody is cool with me drinking on camera. Is that all right?
I mean, Twitch isn't, but I don't know what's in that bottle. That could be anything. That could
be
apple
water.
Juice.
It's water. It's in a brown bottle to preserve the taste of the water.
That is so funny and ironic and hipster of you to put water in a brown glass bottle. That is water.
Hipster guy. All right, so we're going to start. If everybody's cool, we're going to start with Canadian Kaz. Canadian Kaz, thank you for your question. The question is, have you been in a game where things were clearly getting to be too much for someone and they had to walk away? And the stream sort of has us arranged in a way, and I think we'll answer down the line. I'll say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I ran a large LARP organization with thousands of players for years, and I was one of the guys that even, I don't want to say that I'm perfect. I don't want to say that even back in the early 2000s, I was hitting on all cylinders. I definitely wasn't. I've learned a lot. But even back then, I was one of the guys who was sort of sounding the alarm, I think, in my local games for safety mechanics. And as president of Underground Theater, I was very, very clear about, we need to have a system for people to be able to say, I need out of this scene. Because I do have PTSD. I have PTSD from my wartime service, but I actually have CPTSD. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder from before I ever joined the military. I'm an adult victim of child abuse, and there were scenes that sort of snuck up on me when I was playing various games that I had to walk away from. I had to say I can't do this, and I have had mixed results throughout my role-playing career of being able to walk away without people pulling the sort of, well, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. And I've learned a lot from that. So certainly I have been in places and in moments where I needed to get the hell out of a scene right now, or I have seen other people needed to get the hell out of a scene but didn't know how to verbalize that. So our game, the game that Jim and I produced, comes equipped with a set of safety standards that basically give you what you need to get out of a situation if you get too deep. Because, I mean, let's face it, horror gaming is we want to evoke a certain feeling. However, the feeling we want to evoke is a very thin line from the feeling we really do not want to evoke. So I think all horror games need to have very set in stone safety mechanisms, so that because you may not always know as a player when you're approaching the red line. It may be after a thing happens, a few seconds, where you're like, oh shit, I can't be a part of this anymore. So that's where I'm at. What do you think, Jim?
To be honest, I have always been relatively tame in the storytelling that I do. So I have never had anyone approach me and say that there was something in the game that was a little too intense. But I do remember I was actually a player in a scene, and I kind of got in over my head, and I made it a little too intense without actually intending it to. You remember it was the interrogation on my Toreador.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
I remember that scene. I barely knew you in that moment.
And it was one of those things where, boy, that got away from, and it was nothing like horrible. It wasn't like, anything that would really raise much alarm, but it got a little more intense than I intended it to. And I remember afterwards I needed to take a break. I was like, wow, that got a little serious there. But I mean, I didn't lose the humanity though, so it turned out okay.
So B-Dave, do you ever feel like you've been or you've seen people, or you yourself have been in a situation where you needed to get out of a scene?
One little housekeeping thing: when you guys are putting the questions in the Twitch chat, if you put capital question in front of it, it's easier for us to pick it out when we're going through there.
Otherwise, I'm having to sort of scroll down in the chat and find them as I go.
Yeah, just put the big word question in front of it. This came up quite a bit in our Discord, because we've been going since we started playing the games in June. The Discord went live either in July or August, so it's been a little while now. And we've had a few times that we've sort of tripped over some things, and a few times where, like, to your point, people didn't know it was an issue, or we have some bleed issues that have kind of come in. And just the way we've handled it is we just have sort of just the red X, and if the red X goes up, everything stops. You don't ask what, you don't ask why. If they're just like, can't do it, you're like, well, okay, we're stopped. And it's simple, because you can only really work and really explore things when you feel safe to do so. And I've been on both sides of it, because I myself will almost never pull the plug because I don't know what your limits are. And I don't know if maybe this is the time that you've decided to test your own limits. I don't know, so most of the check-ins, like especially in the streams I've been a part of, because obviously Vampire gets super heavy. If you saw the season finale, we had a ton of check-ins during the breaks there. We're Alive Frontier got super heavy all the time. And we just intermittently check in, but for the most part, the scenes would always complete. But in both of those games, both We're Alive and Vampire, it was like, do you have any like no-goes? Do you have any like hard red X issues? And we were like, no, hit us with literally anything. I mean, obviously within reason. Some things will get you banned on Twitch. That's just basic human decency, morality stuff. But for the most part, we were like, no, we want to dig into it, we want to get into it. So I think it's just, the important part is to what you were saying, when some people were kind of like, why are you being weird type thing. Like I had a person in one of our games who was really triggered by Twilight. They were dead serious. Any mention of Twilight, like beyond just like, that movie sucked, like, no, it actually like conjured real negative things for them. So it's like, well, okay, then we're not gonna talk about Twilight. No problem, you're cool, don't worry about it, no big deal. And it's just one of those things. You don't know someone's background, you don't know what their anchors are, you don't know what their triggers are, and that stuff is valid. And it's not, if they're having a moment of a personal crisis, that's not them trying to mess up your game or ruin your fun. That's a human being who's in pain, and you should treat them as such and respect it. So
Absolutely. So I do want to move on to the next question, but I want to pull up something, B Dave, that you just said. By the way, what is the correct way to say your first name? Do I say B Dave or just Dave or just B or just what's up?
Just point, man, dude,
Dude,
chief, fella,
over
guy.
here.
You know, yeah, no, just Dave is fine. Like whatever. I
All
mean,
right,
B Dave is my showbiz name. That's the branding, you know. But I think by this point, everyone knows you mean me. So yeah.
Fair enough. I'll say B Dave because I want to honor your showbiz name. Because that's the coolest thing I've ever heard someone say to me in person. So,
wait, can I be like 3J, like J. Jonah Jameson? You know, like I mean, there's like the two of you, and then I'm like honorary.
Somebody in the chat called you Bidet Walters. So
you know, Ash calls me Bedave, but you got to slap that V on there, otherwise it's like that electronic toilet thing, you know. But they might have meant that. They might have meant that, and let's be honest, they're not completely wrong. They're not.
So I want to get to the next question, but before I move to the next question, I just want to bring up something real quick that I really love that you said there, and it's going to sound a little pretentious, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. You used the word work. You said that we can't do work if we don't know each other's, if we're not comfortable with each other, and I think that is a really important way. Now, I think that you're saying it specifically because of your background in acting, but for those of us who do use tabletop gaming specifically kind of as a means to do some experiential, basically rehearsal of what it is that we feel about ourselves, it's work. It's work, and we need to be able to do that work, and we need things to be aligned in such a way that we can do it. So I'm going to move on to Mr. Janisu, who said, what's been one of the most cathartic experiences that you in gaming that you've had, and how has gaming helped you with your issues? So I'll start with saying that I've had so many incredibly cathartic gaming scenes throughout my life, but I will say that I very seriously doubt they're listening right now, but two very old friends of mine, a guy named Gabriel Balmus and a guy named Drew Urbanek, helped me overcome some very real, very negative feelings I was having in LARP all the way back in, I want to say 99 or 2000. We were in an elevator, and they were going to kill my character because my character had made a very bad decision, and I was on my knees as a person crying. And I remember even back in, and like I said, it was just like 99 or 2000. I remember Gabriel being like, hey man, this is a check-in. Are you okay? And I remember me being like, yeah, my character's going to die, but I need this. Keep going. And it was extremely cathartic because it helped me face some stuff at the time that I was dealing with. It had nothing to do with this game, but I needed to be able to express emotions in a way that I was not normally capable of expressing. And it helped me just dump all of this negativity out in a way that I don't think I've ever really reached that height again. Jim, what about you, man?
So it's hard for me to think of like a specific incident. So I'm going to give a really kind of generic answer and say that gaming as a whole has done that for me. And let me explain why. When I joined the Army, I joined in October of 2002. I went to basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then I was sent to my first duty station after training in April of 2003. In the second week of May 2003, I was on a bus to Ramstein, where I was going to get on a plane to fly to Kuwait, where I was going to get on a convoy and drive to Baghdad. So less than 3 weeks after getting to my first assignment, I was sent immediately downrange. After about 7 months of being in Iraq, I was
real quick. Downrange is military speak for going to war.
Correct. When I got to Iraq, I was there for about 7 months, and we were on patrol, and a grenade got thrown in our truck, and I was medevaced. I was sent back to the rear, and I ended up having to change my job. I was artillery at the time, but because of my injuries, I had to change jobs. So I switched over to pharmacy, and I was in pharmacy for about 12 years for the rest of the time that I was in. I just got out in 2017. there was a really heavy weight on me after that because I got sent back and my buddies didn't. My friends were still in Iraq. Not every one of them came back, and there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of feeling like I had let people down, feeling like I had burned out too quick. You know, like there was still more that I could have done that I failed to do. So the reason I love gaming so much is because it lets me step into the shoes of someone who can do things, of someone who can be a hero, someone who can accomplish things, someone who can do great things, help people, you know, and do all those things that I feel that in real life I was robbed of the opportunity of doing. And that's what gaming has done for me. Gaming has let me kind of vicariously live those ideals, those values, those things that I hold really important and central to me, who I am as a person, that I didn't think I would ever be able to do. So gaming has given me a vehicle to experience those things.
So before I move on to B Dave, Jim, I want to tell you that uh, I don't want to make this a Jim and James love session, but you are a hero. You have done something that 99% of the people in this world have not done. And that is all because I know how uncomfortable it makes me when people say that to me. And I just wanted to make you really uncomfortable in front of 97 people. So, B Dave, what's up? What about you, man? Tell us about a cathartic experience that you've had.
I'm not done making him uncomfortable. So, important point of
Yes.
clarification here, Jim.
Uh-huh.
In the years hence, you do realize, even if only intellectually, that none of that is true, right? That
I
none of
mean,
that is your fault. That none
yeah,
of that.
it's the rational mind understands it. The emotional part is like, I'm not so sure.
No, I understand. No, I'm not here to make you wrong about it. I just,
Right.
I'm like, has that software been uploaded?
It has it competes with other software sometimes, but it's in there.
Well, it's a point that I often make, that I was making on a panel earlier today. The only reason anyone plays these games, whether or not they realize it, is to feel like they are at cause in things, that their actions and inactions matter. That is why video games will never completely eliminate tabletop, ever, no matter how good games get. And I'm a gamer, but they will never do away with this medium because of that. The fact that you can completely steer things and alter things and like have what you do matters, be it heroic or villainous, your action or inaction, like you have an impact, especially in a world where everyone feels the default setting of most human existence is a feeling of powerlessness, which now in the current climate is abject powerlessness. That we are all literally being beset by an invisible foe, that the only thing we can do to battle is nothing.
I've
And
been
that's
training
tough.
for this fight my whole life.
Literally all my training has led to this. Yeah. Which again, that's why you're seeing this huge uptick in games, because people don't just need an entertainment outlet, they just need to feel like they can do something. I, for my part, I most of my experiences, I'm actually really not a particularly emotional person by nature. Like, I don't cry for sad things. I cry over happy things. I cry happy tears in a heartbeat. I can't even like name the things that make me emotional or happen right now. I can't do it. But for the most part, I'm very like stoic, stiff upper lip with sad things. And I think when we had an episode of We're Alive Frontier where my character was a medicine man. It was Chateau, and I had the plant medicine, which was the non-specific vision quest inducing smokable thing that I just had. And we would use it in scenes to like basically give opportunities for some exposition and some insight into some characters. And in that particular episode, Anjali Bhamani and Xander Jeanneret had both done their scenes, and of course they're astonishing, just astonishing. Like, it's sickening how good they are. And then we get around to my little scene, and I'm expressing what I was experiencing. He had a vision of his grandfather there, and I was talking to my grandfather, and I got all emotional in the moment, and I started crying, which is the only time it's ever happened to me in one of these things. Even I was kind of shocked by it. I was like, I'm malfunctioning, my eyes are leaking, what's wrong? Like what is this? But still like being able to be that much in the moment and have it come out, I thought was interesting. But what I've seen more than anything, especially in the games I run, is the most powerful experiences I find people have had is we've done a lot of things with, I pay attention to two important things. It's interesting to me when these people come into this world, it's the modern world, it's very close to this world, what face they choose to put on and who they choose to be. Like, you could do anything. Who do you choose? One of you, I'm not going to out anybody, said they play a character very much like how they see themselves. You know, I have a character who, a player on my one of my players who went so far is like, I'm literally me from 15 years ago, and he used to refer to it as a better version of me from 15 years ago, which I was kind of like, that hurts, but okay. And I've watched his language sort of change over time. But a lot of the plots have involved a lot of things like just getting to go back and fix things, getting to go back and see someone, getting to go back and say goodbye to somebody, to hug them one last time. There's been times that literally they've met Cain, they've met Lilith. And for the most part, when I have those interactions, I've very intentionally largely made them positive, because oftentimes people haven't had that. They haven't had a superior or someone they looked up to look them in the eye and say, I'm proud of you, or I love you, or you've done a good job, you know, even in a fictitious way. And I can't tell you how many people I've had, well, I'm getting emotional talking about this. I can't tell you how many people I've had hit me up on the backside. Again, I'm not here to share anyone's stories, but to just tell me just really what it meant to them, that even, you know, a fictitious vampire's fictitious father in a fictitious way just said, I love you, son, you know, and what that meant to them, you know. So yeah, I think
I definitely like. I want to move ahead, but again, B Dave, I want to tell you that you definitely are one of those folks that I think really practices what you're preaching right now, because I had the opportunity to play alongside you not long ago, and I played secondary to you, playing a Anarch canon NPC, and man, you really like. I didn't know that was sort of a thing that you were mega into, but you did it in that game. You played a version of that character, and I've seen many versions of that character played, but I saw a character or a version of that character played that was all about us, all about empowering players, not about swinging his big old character sheet around, but about being very much behind us and helping us. And like, I thought at the time, like, man, this feels good. This feels good to have this canon NPC behind us, even though it was a small scale tabletop game. Like, yeah, that's and I love that a lot. We're going to move along though, because we're popular and we're getting a lot of questions. So we're going to move right to Jumanji Costco.
Look at this. Look at this. Obfuscate
Coffee cup. There's nothing in that coffee cup.
What is it? You don't even know. Look at this. Oh, now what? Oh, what? Now it's back again. What? Yeah, sorry. Also, Jumanji Costco is a homie. I mean, all these people are homies, but yeah, you're a homie. Also, hey, there's water in that bottle. Again, why would you put water in that green glass bottle? That's weird.
I don't know. I'm
That's
a bad
weird,
person.
man.
Jumanji Costco. God, I love that name so much. How do you toe the line between using a character based in some of your own personal trauma versus keeping yourself safe mentally? My response, I'm not going to get too in depth here, is that I don't. I screw this up every time. I am one of those players who likes to be pushed to my absolute limits in character. And if I need to break from the scene, I have, I have pre-negotiated my safety mechanics to get out. But for me, make believe and pretend is make believe and pretend. That is not to say I have never been pushed too far. That is not to say I've never needed to get out of a scene. But I only play with people I trust to allow me out of a scene. So when I dive deep into something that I know is, I do play a character in one of my vampire games that is very similar to me in a lot of very negative ways. And it is with the understanding that if I need to get out of a scene, now sometimes my storyteller will say, if you leave this scene, it's a combat scene, your character's probably going to die. My response to that has to be, okay, cool, my character dies, but I personally can't be in the scene anymore because it's too far for me emotionally. And that, you know, that character is played in a LARP with about 40 other people, so you can't just bail out of a combat scene in a LARP like that. But in a tabletop scene where I feel like my character's too close to me as a person, I trust my storytellers to understand that there are times where I have to get out, and that's pretty rare. But that's pretty rare because I'm a masochist and I am okay with being hurt. Um, Jim, what about you? How do you deal with towing the line between your in character and out of character triggers?
So I toe the line by kind of staying away from it, but not completely. So to make a really bad analogy to kind of explain what I'm trying to say here, I have never lost a foot, but I have stubbed a toe. And stubbing my toe made me realize I don't want to lose the foot. So what I do is I find things that are comparable but less severe. Like me personally, I have a crippling fear of any body of water that I can't see through. And I would be real uncomfortable playing a horror RPG where my character was submerged in black water or muddy water or murky. Like that would get my heart rate up. I would start freaking out a little bit. But maybe I have a character that's just afraid of drowning, and it doesn't necessarily matter. Like that way, I can have a character that is afraid of water, but it's clear water. It's crystal clear water that I'm normally okay with. But they are afraid of that water. So it's that fear to a lesser degree, so it's more manageable for me. And then maybe as I get more comfortable with that character, maybe he goes near a river and the water is a little muddy, but he's gotten okay with clear water, so he's going to try. And it's baby steps like that, like taking those little steps to kind of acclimate yourself to something that that does freak you out, to the point where you are able to keep yourself composed and understand that this is just kind of make believe. And like you were saying, the game is the game. And
So as I kind of dive into it, you sort of ease yourself into it.
correct. Yeah. You just kind of jump in. I dipped a toe in first to check the temperature, and then I put a leg in, and, I gradually get in, because I find that I get less system shock like that.
Well, B-Dave, what do you think? What about you? How do you toe the line between using a character based in your own personal trauma versus keeping yourself safe?
Oh, I mean, the simple answer is there is no wrong way to do it. It's whichever way is a fulfilling experience for you. I say a lot on my Discord, if it's not fun, don't do it. But sometimes fun is the wrong word. Sometimes it's soul wrenching and agonizing, but cathartic. You feel light on the other side of it. So, fun may not be how you describe that sequence of events. Like we had just a couple of weeks ago, I had a request to run a scene in one of our live games where one character was dating another character's ghoul, and they were like, tonight she's either got to get turned to a kindred or she's got to die. Like, I mean, OOC, like this is where her narrative is heading. Like, it's gonna go a hard left or a hard right, but one way or another, tonight's the night. And I'd been tipped off that they were like, the person that spoke to me was like, she probably is going to die. And I was like, okay, great. And we went through the whole thing, and it turns out they began the process of embracing her. If you're familiar with vampire, it's you have to get the human basically to the absolute brink of death, and then give them your blood, and then that's how you make a vampire. And they got interrupted.
There's a role-playing game about vampires?
I mean, there's at least a streaming series on twitch.tv/World of Darkness, 8 p.m. Fridays. But I knew in my own mind that from the moment he did it, that she had a certain amount of time until she was going to be dead. And I knew it, and I was tracking it. And they didn't get to her in time, and I knew she was dead. And finally, they check back, and it was like, okay, I give her my Vitae, and I'm like, nothing happens, And we had this whole emotional thing of them grieving over her. And then half of them left, and then her ghost turned up. And then we had like a whole separate emotional thing in the process of saying goodbye to her. That was something that like needed to be dealt with and needed to be processed, and I'm glad that it happened, and I'm glad that it happened the way that it did. With me and my character creation, I've been blessed to do this a lot now that I've played so many things that at this point, you know, my main drive is to do something different. But I created Chateau for We're Alive Frontier because I consciously thought, I'm like, what kind of person would have lived through this? Like, what kind of person would have made it this far? And I built him using my answers to those questions. Then Vampire came along, and I knew that I wanted Victor to be a Ventru for reasons I've talked about at length elsewhere, but I knew I wanted him to be a Ventru. And I very much set out to make him not Chateau. Like, I really made conscious choices that were like different. And then over the emergent nature of the play, and quite frankly, just me being who I am, just certain things happen that those characters kind of aligned to the point that I'm like, Victor's basically me. So all of that is to say is when you really see him go through the ringers, and the things that affect him are the things that affect me. I think probably my own most traumatic thing in the past, to not at all attempt to compare to what Jim talks about, but I had a similar experience when I was 16. I had a friend commit suicide who was 14. I had talked her off the ledge multiple times before, 2 or 3 times, and she had moved away, and this was in the 90s, so you know, this is the internet was in its infancy. Like, it wasn't so simple as just picking up a cell phone. You know, keeping in touch took effort. And we hadn't talked in a while, and I was like, no, we're gonna talk. And we kind of talk at New Year's or whatever, and I'm like, it's no big deal. And we just sort of lost touch. And then I got a call one day that she had shot herself, and she had shot herself in town. She'd moved to Colorado and was back in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I'm from, and was at a hospital in Little Rock. And in the time that I went to put on my shoes to go to the hospital, I got a second call that she was gone. And I blamed myself for years about that. Years. That if I just picked up the phone one more time, you know, maybe she'd still be alive. And I got to the point that I could tell people, I could look them in the eye and be like, no, I super get that it wasn't my fault. And it was like the beast from Vampire, like, oh, but it was though, bro. You know? Now in the fullness of time, I do fully comprehend that it wasn't my fault, and that, you know, what was at work in her head with her own chemicals and psychology, and, you know, some things just are the way they are, because it's been, you know, 25 years. So in that, Jim, I know what you mean when you talk about the mental knowledge that it wasn't your fault. It may or may not be emotional knowledge. I hope you get to the point that it is emotional knowledge, you know, but because it wasn't your fault. And I've never processed anything like that in a character, because I think just kind of in general, you know, sort of suicide-ish stuff is kind of off limits in storytelling.
Survivor's guilt is a hard thing to deal with, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was kind of a long rambling answer, but yeah, that's my answer.
That was a great answer. I tell you what, we've got about 15 minutes before we have to clear the channel. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try to rapid fire some answers. You know, I think some of these questions are really deep. We have a very deep topic. We only have an hour to discuss it. So, you know, don't limit yourself too terribly much, but we're going to try to rapid fire. We're a popular panel. We've gotten a ton of questions, and I want to get to as many of them as I can. Chibi Graz, Mini Z's, Chibi Grazd, I'm not going to try, asks, I'm a vet, and now I work as a licensed clinical social worker. I've always gravitated to horror in my TTRPGs, even in D&D. For me, it's been a catharsis and a tool to deal with my own anxiety and depression. How have horror games helped you? My answer, Chibi, is that horror games have helped me, and I'm sorry that we're not going to ramble as much on these answers. My pretty easy answer here is these games have helped me explain to people who do not have the comorbidities I have what it is like to be me. They're reductive and they're limited, but they help me sort of show people what it's like to live in my skin. What do you think, Jim?
You took my answer. B-Dave, what's up?
Anybody whose questions we don't get to or don't get to at length, you can message me on Twitter at @BDaveWalters. My DMs are open, and I'll give you a more substantive answer. We can talk about it there.
And you can hit Jim up at the Midnight WOR1, because we, for some reason, don't know how Twitter works. Or you can find us on Facebook at The Midnight World, and you can hit us up too.
My Twitter
Um,
handle is my Twitch handle. I just put it in the chat. So just put an @ in front of that. That's me on Twitter.
you know, there's a quote who GK Chesterton, I think and I'm paraphrasing anyway, that it's fairy tales don't exist to tell children that dragons are real. They already know dragons are real. Fairy tales exist to let children know dragons can be beaten. That's the value of horror, facing and overcoming the monster. And I think, you know, modern storytelling like vampire is easier to be closer to it, because even though I've been party to some very scary sessions of D&D, I'm DMing one now in a Dark and Wish. They're getting run through the ringer by lithids in Undermountain. But there's always going to be a certain wall there between, you know, how connected you feel to your halfling rogue versus how you feel to someone that's you. And I think just getting to face and work through those things in a safe way where you're not really in danger, but can still have the emotional payoff of having stood your ground and done something, or done something different, at least in and of itself, is valuable. Also, bold of you to assume I wasn't going to ramble.
No, you can ramble, man. You're good. We could talk at length. I have a history in hobbyist anthropology. We could get. I'm not at all an expert, but we could talk at length about the value of play as rehearsal and all of that stuff. Again, though, I do want to hit, before we move any further forward, that you can hit up B Dave on his Twitter channel, or Twitter. You can hit up us at the Midnight World on Facebook or Twitter, and we can answer these questions more in depth. Carrion Comfort Studios says, as a player seeing someone get to that point, how would you handle nipping a situation in the bud without causing a fuss at the table or putting a spotlight on a player? So if in my opinion, if a player is crossing a line, there are a couple of ways to handle that. And the first way to handle that is you kind of have to know that player. If you're going to play horror games that are down in the depths of what, you know, what a player's actual psychological triggers may be, you know, you need to have trust at your table. And if one of your players is stepping across the line and you seriously trust your table, then it's very easy to say, hey, let's take a break for a second. Let me talk to this player. If you have a player who's being a jerk, I have no problem at all dropping a spotlight on that player and kicking him out of my table. But I don't normally do that because I normally only have players at my table that I trust. What do you think, Jim?
I agree completely. I think if you are in sync with the people at your table, I don't think you really have to worry about putting a spotlight on the person. I mean, and then there's always just the, hey, can we take a real quick break? I need to use the bathroom. And then when everybody gets up and kind of scatters and moves, then you can kind of close in and talk to the person you want to talk to, or talk to the storyteller, or someone else at the table. Just or you can take somebody who's completely unaffiliated with the whole thing and just say, hey, this kind of bothered me a little bit. Can I get your advice on how I should approach this? I mean, if you have a group, they rely on that group. Like that group has come together for a reason. Even if that reason is just to play tabletop games, you all already have something in common, is that you like these tabletop games. So build on that. You know, use those relationships, and tap that for you know, for the resource it is. And you know, as long as you have those lines of communication, I don't think now if it's like a pickup group, or if you're the new person in the group or something like that, then I think it's perfectly okay to even pull out your phone and message one of them privately and say, hey, I'm a little uncomfortable right now. Can we take a break or something? That way you don't have to dime yourself out. You don't have to dime the other person out. Little things like that can really help up those communication habits between you and your group. And
so, like, especially if you're running a Twitch channel and every player is clearly uncomfortable with a sexual assault scene that you're describing, maybe you stop and see how everybody's doing. I'm not calling out anything in specific. What do you think, B Dave, about that? If one of your players is causing a problem at your table, how do you approach them without sort of calling them out and making a scene, or do you just make a scene?
It just depends. I mean, you never go wrong with being like, hey, quick check-in, is everyone okay? Because there's those times that you don't want to like break the moment, you know, just, hey, quick check-in, is everybody okay? Like you said, use the technology, because sometimes the person that is feeling the most stressed out is afraid to speak up. Maybe they will message you. I have gotten messages from people on Discord that is just like, this, I might have to stop, but I don't want to. My anxiety is giving me some trouble. I might be a little quiet, but I'm here, and I try not to bust people out. Again, for my sake, my part, for the most part, I will not pull the plug because I don't know your limit. Like you might get the like, I mean, we're all okay, and then we keep going. I'll tell you in same thing, season finale of Vampire. If for people who may not be caught up, the things get emotional. Xander was very emotional in his portrayal, and at one point I was thinking to myself, I was like, I need to give Xander an out so we don't spend the next 40 minutes of him just having to be frantic. Alex. And that's when I bring up Zelios. And I'm like, so who's this Zelios cat everybody's on about? Because I intentionally was like, let me help Xander get an out here. What's up, Alex? And then I turn and look at Alex and he's crying. And I was like, fuck. Because I was like, because in that moment, because it's for the most part, I really, my nature's, I regret nothing in these performances. It goes where it goes. And it's but in that moment I actually felt really bad because I was like, one, I just threw the ball to Alex. I don't know what he's thinking. Two, I just changed the subject. I don't know if he was done with what we're dealing with. I just messed this up. He, of course, then took it up and ran, a fantastic direction with it, which also I won't say. After that, when we went to break, this is the only time in 4 seasons, Jason came to us and he's like, is everybody okay? We might actually not even tape the second half of the episode. Like that was good enough. Like we might just be done here. And we went to break and we really kind of went back and forth. It's like, are we done early tonight? And the consensus was, we'll come back, we'll tape it, and we'll, maybe if it's not as strong, we won't air it. Maybe we'll do it as a bracket on the other side of the epilogue. Like, who knows? We'll just see. And then additional hijinks ensued. And it went where it went. But we stopped everything for a check-in. Like we were like, we'll shut down production like if we need to, that's just how it was. So
specifically Jason is really Jason is a great guy and he is very good at that. But he is the guy who will he'll only really step in if he thinks he needs to. And when he needs to step in, he does need to step in. He's really good about that. So, question, how do you feel about players playing evil characters in order to work out stress or frustration from their usual lives, destructive tendencies in order to vent? I'm going to be very, very short on this one because I'm going to get myself in trouble if I don't. My answer to that is do not play role-playing games if that's what you're trying to do. If you're trying to work out frustrations because you feel destructive in your life and you feel like you don't have power in your life and you want to hurt something, do not play role-playing games because there are other players that are strapped into that seat with you. There are other players who are in the car who didn't necessarily consent to you having a bad day. Go play video games instead where you can be sort of single player. But if what you want to do is ruin somebody else's day so that you don't feel so bad, maybe you don't do it through role-playing games. I believe that role-playing games are a collaborative process and not a thing that you do to hurt each other. That's where I'm at. What do you think, Jim?
I agree with that 99%, with that 1% just saying if you have a group that wants to do that together and it's something you all come to consensually, you all come up with a plan, you all come up with an idea and you're like, hey, let's just run a campaign where we just get to be assholes. If that's something that you want to do, I would not knock it. I would not want to play in that game. And I would be very concerned about how easily that game could go off the rails. But I won't knock it if there is a group that has consensually come together and they said, yeah, this is something that we just all kind of want to do. But it has to be something that the group unanimously decides to do. The unanimous is absolute in that case. I don't think you can have just one person or a couple people that are like, I'm not really into that. I think it absolutely has to be an all or nothing type thing with your group.
Yeah, I'd kind of split the answer in half. I wouldn't want it to turn into PvP because that could get gross quickly.
Yep.
But if it's something that you want to work out emotionally in the world, I think there's room for that. It's just, if you go and you punch the world's going to hit back.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it's like, I've had a bad day, I'm going to go do a mass turning tonight. So I mean, okay, sure. Let's follow that where it goes, because when you snap out of it, you're now going to have all these new childer and all of the consequences of that, because I think within reason, of course, I would rather the person almost work it out in this place of relatively low stakes than have that like bubble and fester and turn into something even grosser. It's almost like I'd almost rather head it off in like, let's do something like level 3 gross before you like disappear down the freaking dark web, and do some level 13 gross and fall in with the wrong people that are all just hurt and angry and bitter. But I would definitely draw a huge distinction between what you're doing to NPCs in the world and what you're doing to people at the table.
100%.
Yep.
So we are at 11:55, and I believe that the channel has another game coming up an actual play coming up at 12 that they're going to want this channel for. So we're going to slide on out. I know there's a ton of questions that did not get asked, and really good questions too. So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of an opportunity to tell you where to ask those questions to. So my name is James Davey. You are welcome to add me on Facebook. I may not friend you because I'm going to be locking down my Facebook a lot right now because it's too much bad news on Facebook. But you can always message me and I will read what you've got to say. You can also find Jim and I both at the Midnight World on Facebook. That's our game. We'd love you to drop by and check us out. Send us a message with any of the questions that you have that didn't quite get answered. We are absolutely willing to talk at length. We are verbose people. You can also find us on, if you want to go to Kickstarter and look up the Midnight World, the Kickstarter's over. We're not petitioning for more money, but if you follow us on Kickstarter, you'll get all the updates. We're going to do bi-weekly updates from now on. We just finished our Kickstarter at just shy of 200% funding. We're going to be sharing our updates with people until we launch completely in the fall. So you can always hit me there and ask me these questions. Jim, do you have another place they can hit you besides that?
I mean, the Twitter accounts got posted in the chat earlier. But yeah, the Midnight World account on Twitter, my account on Twitter, Facebook, that reaches both of us. Like we both can respond on both Twitter and Facebook. So if you want to talk to one of us in particular, just specify, because we both have the same access to the page. So, but if you want both of us to answer, don't specify, because we'll probably both answer if you don't. But yeah, just those are the best avenues of approach, I guess.
So B-Dave, if these folks in this chat want to ask you specifically these questions, how do they hit you up?
You can tweet at me, or you could DM me. DMs are open. I'm about to start producing a lot more content. A lot of people don't know this because you know me from my gaming thing. I had a talk radio show for 7 years. I wrote like 500 nationally syndicated articles for BeliefNet. So I've been doing this a long time. Yes, I'm going to start putting out some more content like that. So if I don't respond to you directly, I might make a video or something about it. But of course, I'll leave your personal deets out and just, go over what we talk about. So yeah, at B Dave Walters. I'm at B Dave Walters everywhere. Get at me. And thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you guys for hosting this. And thank you guys for sharing all that you shared.
Well, B-Dave, thank you for being here with us, man. Like this is we were just a couple of geeks who created a game a few years ago, and now we're on a panel with B-Dave Walters. And I know, like, in your heart, you're not necessarily a celebrity, but to us, you are.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. My heart is super. Yeah, no,
as soon as this stream is over, I'm going to go downstairs, stick my face into a pillow, and just scream.
He's going to masturbate is what he's going to do. And
really?
It's going to get weird.
We got to a real weird place with that.
I know. That got dark quickly. Also, you're not hearing a no.
That's right. Put it down. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and end this so that the next folks who can or who need the stream can come online. And B Dave, hit us up off this at some point. We'd love to play with you in the future. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.